Stuff happening. Bitcoin is putting in all-time highs today, 110,000. And what does that mean for the altcoins and all the crypto market and other markets in general? Because we know that crypto is risk on assets. So that is a major headline. We've also got a really cool goal on in the chat right now for a secret video, which we will share in this show if we manage to reach the target. And we've got exciting news coming out of OpenAI and Johnny Ive's startup IO. Big stuff happening in the world of AI today, ladies and gents. So that will be our news behind the news section in today's show. Welcome everybody in the live chat. How are you doing? Is the stream working well? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Let me know in the chat box. And let me know how you've been getting on, because this has been exciting times. We talked last week about Bitcoin. There's a chart beside me. We talked last week about Bitcoin and how there seemed to be this repositioning of the open interest with the heartbeat pattern and the potential for the all-time high price to be hit and possibly even exceeded, which is what happened. So we called it, and we did talk about how the volatility was obviously going to go up, which we saw. And we spoke about the volatility bands, which you can see actually on the chart beside me here, those upward diagonal lines. And we were talking about how that was providing a little bit of resistance on the price. And then it's busted right on through. So that is awesome. And we're 2 out of 20 towards our goal already. That's freaking awesome. Thanks so much for 1,000 Years of Darkness for getting us 5% towards our goal. XD, 5%? Pardon? XD started the ball rolling. Trade spotting in the background, keeping me on my toes. Let me know that was XD that got the ball rolling. So if we get to that goal, folks, we have got a super exciting clip to play. Super exciting. It's fun. It's good. It's just it's something that we filmed just for you guys in the audience today. So it's exclusive for you. Did you see the short that I put out today at Sueno Stone? If you haven't, then you'll have to be checking that out on my channel. Go check out my channel, look at my shorts, and you'll see a video that came out today with Jamie and I at Sueno Stone. And we filmed another video there, a horizontal one, which we'll share with people in today's show. Super secret though, so don't tell people what it's about. But the big news, and to start the show today, is of course the Bitcoin chart there that's beside us, and that's the weekly time frame. We can see that the prices have got a high watermark there in 109,845 here on the Binance chart, 24-hour time frame, and you can see that the resistance I spoke about with these volatility bands has been tested a few times, and today it has pushed through for the first time in so long to have been up at that price. So there are a lot of recoveries happened in the crypto market in the big daddy coin there of Bitcoin, but has the other markets actually kept abreast of this change? And they haven't really. If we just bring up the others chart, so this is everything excluding the top 10 cryptos, so it doesn't have even USDT in there, never mind Bitcoin and Ethereum. We can see that there has been a lovely rise up, which then sank back down, and prices are currently around about the closes that we've had in the recent past there. If you look back to Sunday, for example, and Monday, we had a close and an open there just at the price where it is right now. So that's not an all-time high, right? It's not an all-time high, is it? And we've also got these volatility bands on this chart, and I can see that as I bring on more data, it looks a bit more busy on the chart there, but you've got the drawings I put on in the past, highlighting the volatility bands. And as I bring them off one by one, you'll see the importance that we put on that level recently, and it's not bust through. So that's the likes of seeing, you're probably going to see Solana moving back up towards its 250 high if the price of the others chart can push up. Now, Solana is one of those top 10 coins that's not on this list, I believe. And so, like, you know, this is the part of the market. This is the part of the market which has got a lot to prove, right? A lot to prove. Altcoin holders out there know what I'm talking about. There's a lot to prove from this part of the market. And the altcoin space, what it's looking for is, of course, for Bitcoin to establish itself up to their all-time highs. Now, if you're just tuning into the show, folks, the reason we're talking about this at the minute right now is because Bitcoin today put in its all-time high. That's right. It's official. And the question is in people's heads in the crypto space overall is if Bitcoin can establish itself at its all-time highs, when the heck are the rest of the coins going to get back to their all-time highs or even close to it, you know, because a lot of them remain 75-80% down, you know, or however much, lots down. So we want to see that, and we want to also see the total market cap go up, which is everything right in the top 150. So this is including Bitcoin and all those altcoins as well, and Ethereum. You can see it's not at its all-time high either. So there's quite a lot of room for those things to go. So what's separating the two at the moment? What's the big hullabalooza? New member, check it out. New member. It's actually, I think it's a membership flare alert that came up there, isn't it? But do join up to the membership if you haven't already. Hi everybody. So this is our working doc for the day, and we wanted to point out that Bitcoin. That's not a very fat pen. I want a fatter pen. Want a fatter pen? Thanks, mate. Bitcoin is at its all-time highs, and the other coins are not at their all-time highs. So Ethereum, Sol, ADA, these big ones that you will have heard of, XRP, are not at all-time highs. And the result of that is if you take all these and you put them into a basket, that basket together is the total chart, and that's what we were looking at just a second ago. So the total chart, where's my, yeah, so the total chart is this one just here, and it's not at its all-time highs. So what we're asking then is, what is stopping these altcoins from being at their all-time highs and dragging down this index? And the answer, simply, really, is going to be summed up quite simply with one word. Confidence. It's all about the confidence. And so how would the market get confidence, right? How would the market get confidence? Where's that going to come from? That's the question. Now, this same question, if you're just tuning in, you're like, oh, I only trade stocks. Think about this for a second, right? This same sort of thing happens in the stocks that you're trading. It does the same sort of thing. If you're into any particular sector and you're looking at relative strength and you're talking about core aspects. So, for instance, say you're into tech stocks and you want to give Nvidia and Apple and the Magnificent Seven that same sort of analysis that we're talking about with cryptocurrency here, and the way that the leading names in that sector are performing. and how that can affect the rest of the sector. It's the same concept, right? So right now we're saying, how can all the companies involved in this sector get that confidence to go forwards when we know that there is a leader? Because we know that there is a leader, right? And the leader is Bitcoin. How does it get the confidence? And the answer is, it's through Bitcoin. It's through Bitcoins, right? So the confidence comes through Bitcoin. So what do we want to see happen in here? It's for Bitcoin to maintain high prices, right? Maintain its all-time high. Stay up there. And this is something that can be defined, right? Something that can be defined, which means that as an investor or a trader, and this is the same, you can do the same sort of analysis when you're looking at stocks and making comparisons. For instance, as well, you can use indexes and your individual stocks to make the same sorts of comparisons. Why is PayPal still around about $70 currently when the Nasdaq has gone up? So it's the same sort of question. You know, you could ask, for instance, here's PayPal, right? That's the PayPal chart. And here's Nasdaq. Similar looking charts, aren't they? Similar looking charts, but Nasdaq is pushed a bit higher than PayPal has. And it's like, well, is there room to grow? So if we start to see the Nasdaq pulling back down here, then and taking out those prior areas, then PayPal, which is similar looking chart but quite a bit lower, and as you can see, has this same sort of curvy area where the prices are going a bit like that. It's called a bull flag for traders, but it's got that little curvy bit there where the sort of the head of the cobra rises, and that's its head. Psst. That is kind of like what we're seeing over there on the Nasdaq futures. So if Nasdaq were to take out its prior lower high along this move up, that would be quite bearish, right? If we take out its prior higher low along this move up, that'd be quite bearish. And you would see that feedback to the PayPal chart. So this is relevant, right? This is relevant to anybody, no matter what you're trading. You could be looking at, we don't need to do another digression, right? But you can do the same sort of thing with other assets, okay? And if you're trading those, you'll know what I mean. So the question then for us, looking at these smaller cap coins, smaller market cap coins, is what do we need to see, right? What do we need to see from this chart here, in order to get this confidence? And it's Bitcoin to stay up there, right? And we can quantify that by saying what we want to see here is for it to push through that volatility band and stay up there, right? Stay up there. And I think that an easier way, not an easier way, a more sophisticated way, that's actually a better word for what we're doing here, would be to recall the stuff we talked about last week. And I'm on my laptop here, so I'm having to do this scrolling with my fingers thing, so everything takes a second longer to show you. But when we were talking last week about the kind of the rebalancing that was happening, that was visible in the order flow of the chart here, and the candlestick price action that we were seeing here was displaying something to us about how there'd been a potential for the larger accounts to be repositioning. Now, at the time, what we said was, of course, that could mean that the big accounts that were long have just flipped short and they're going to go bearish, the market could drop down. So we needed to be wary of pulling back down into prior ranges, and you could have put short stops in it like 96 grand or something like that, whatever. It's moved on up to 110. And that's past this period of the consolidation in that area, and the following on from that kind of signal that we saw that the markets were repositioning slightly. And if we took this prior zone as well that we had as from the price action over here, which I said was where the bears, in advance of gone up to here, this is where the bears would load in with their shorts. And this is then when we saw that right positioning. If we also then consider that that would now represent a bit of a pivot for us, a pivot that if we saw prices breaking down below 100 and sort of 102,000, 102,000 on a closing basis, that then it would get really tempted to test that 100, and then they would also, if they tested 100, that they're right at the last area where kind of the plunge protection team came in at, just here, and they would probably then drop on down to test levels like 96,000, which would put us back into this prior range and could potentially see a need to fulfill any sort of remaining liquidity type gap things that are on the chart here that need to be fulfilled. However, you need to give out. I'm not a financial advisor, right? But you also know that my position when it comes to trading, coaching people how to trade, and educating people how to trade is always from a risk management first perspective. So I look at where the risks are, and when I would need to know that my position or my opinion might need to be adjusted to reflect the current situation in the markets in advance so that my emotions don't interfere. That's that out of the way. What I'm actually looking at here is then saying, where do we get the confidence from? And the confidence on Bitcoin really truly does kick in. And we've covered the whole, what do we need to stay above aspect, but it really kicks in with movements into this volatility band. This is the volatility band that'll take us up towards where a new feeling in the market regarding that confidence would come in, which would be 120 grand. 120 grand is actually a realistic next target for Bitcoin. It's not that far away from 110. However, psychologically, it's stratospheric. It truly is. Here's your weekly chart. 120 grand. Okay, where does 120 grand come in at? And it's up there. And we could say that up there, confidence would be restored. Which means if confidence is restored up there, and that would be the next sort of progression for Bitcoin to do, and I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but if we're having this conversation come August, and it isn't a conversation which involves, well, how do we get back into the 90,000s? You know, how do we need to test $69,000 again? If that isn't the conversation that we're having in August, and instead it's like, is 120 coming this weekend? That type of thing. We'd be looking at it and saying that the confidence in the markets would be very much restored at that point, which is when we can start to look back through the analysis that we started at the start of the show. And by the way, folks, you should be taking something out of this. Like I said, whether it's for your trading your stocks, your crypto, or whatever, you should be taking something out of this cross-market analysis, this relative strength analysis, this approach. By the way, in terms of relative strength, Bitcoin's had strong movements, but I'm not really actually looking at any of the outliers in the market right now that have had the biggest moves and are displaying real relative strength right now. Although we could, and let me know in the chat box, especially through like the donations thing, if they want to dive deep on anything or any stock, let me know, because it's without your feedback, folks, then this becomes my show, but it's your show. So we'd be looking at this and saying, well, this dippy curvy bit, remember that language, or the head of the rising cobra, or indeed this potential kind of bull flag at resistance could move up, and it'll give you a target which has got the girth of what, looking at this weekly time frame, yes, one volatility band of movement. This is one of the reasons why the volatility bands makes it easier to present this show. But if I just measure it, even though it's completely redundant, there's the size of the candle. Where does it take the target to? That's right, shock horror, the next volatility this is a conversation that people who are looking at what could happen next get their teeth stuck into, because all Bitcoin really needs to do is maintain prices up there within touch and distance. So if over the next few days it goes to 111, 109, 112, 110, all of that breeds confidence about the market not having a collapse from the highs, because when you go up to highs and you maintain them, it shows that people could actually be holding their positions as opposed to selling them at the peak price. And that's the story about Bitcoin and the all-time high. Awesome. Let's just see what the chat's saying. Bring the chat onto my screen for a second. Dashi saying, me too. Oh, what's that cool? Halfway. Let's smash this goal. I want carved stones. Yes, you do. You do. 1,000 Years of Darkness knows what the chat is, because that is correct. Lisa's in there as well. Thanks so much. Disco Biscuits, let's see this stone video so we can marvel at the greatness. Lisa, thanks so much. Oh yes, you're really pushing us forward here, Lisa. That's awesome. Sauce Food Cart, best way to gain confidence is to pay for it. Let's be seeing this. Bid then, let's be seeing it. Cheers, Chimpy Yang. T-Ball Hennings in there as well. Dashi, +1 for the Sweno Stone. Cool, awesome. And of course, Lepton, hit that like, classic comment. We've got lots of people in the chat there as well, having a great time. Every good positivity in there. I'm loving it. Good to see you again, Delia. And Marcus, great to see you as well, pal. Cool. So we understand so far in today's show, Bitcoin has made an all-time high. We also know that the pebble which got dropped into that pond is going to have ripples. And if we can time those waves, we might be able to ride one of them, surf it, all the way through to profits. But how do we do that? First, we see the Bitcoin price maintaining up close to those all-time highs, or perhaps moving towards higher ones. We've understood the pivot areas for when markets become a bit bearish again, at least in the short term. So then we understand where confidence comes back into the markets, and we understand the implications of that confidence to allow us to be able to look at making trades with a bias that will be profitable if the trend continues with risk management. So there's 10 amazing things that we understand so far in today's video. Counted them out on my fingers. And we're looking then at the second big piece of news today. And this is big news, folks. This is big news. I think that people aren't aware. I've been talking about this for a while in conversations with people that I meet, conversation with Jamie, conversations with other family and friends, conversations with people who I speak to on a professional level. And it's really dominating my thoughts right now. And I think it's something that people aren't really aware of. And I have tried explaining it to people using analogies like how kids have grown up these days with the internet and mobile phones and what that means, the implications of all that, for example. And I even said to people like things like, you know, I grew up in a world where we had McDonald's, right? Everybody in the audience right now, McDonald's, yeah, it's totally normal. But like for our parents and those generations above, they looked at being able to buy like a cheap burger in the corner of every street as being like a really odd thing. Like they never really ate hamburgers before, they never heard of them outside of the US, etc. Now we all take it for granted. And we're able to dream about a future. So I grew up in a world where Jean-Luc Picard said, "Computer," and the computer went boo and did a basic request. And then whenever I got the first Amazon Alexa, if you remember that, it's like a decade ago now, maybe even 15. I don't know, it was a long time ago now, but the first Amazon Alexa that came out, this thing is really great. I've still even got some, actually, because the speaker was so good. I used them. Alexa, set an alarm for 9 a.m. Whatever, you know, those things. And it went bloom, and it did it. It made you feel like Jean-Luc Picard. And it was amazing. A whole new world opened up. The next thing is, AI gets talked about in a kind of using different words, right? We had people talking about machine learning for a long time throughout that period. And then it became a conversation about AI eventually. OpenAI broke everybody's minds when they released ChatGPT. There were things around that were like it and so on, but I think the world kind of understands that it was ChatGPT that made that earth-shattering step change. Microsoft got involved early because when Bill Gates first used it, he asked it to write a letter, a bereavement letter, I think, just as a really strong test of how this AI would perform, and read it and thought, this is better than what most human beings would be capable of writing, displaying not only logical, correct sentences, but actually displaying an awareness of the meaning of emotion and like the substrate of human existence. Mind-blowing stuff. But that was early versions of ChatGPT, which kind of sucked. And now we're on ChatGPT 4.5, whatever it is, and things are looking kind of pretty good in terms of understanding stuff. You still hit walls when it comes to artificial intelligence, not really understanding things and kind of sometimes being a bit stupid. And that's an incredible privilege to be able to say that and mean it and have the audience right now understand who, if you've used it, which you probably have, because OpenAI has got 1 billion users. That's right, 1 billion users. Let that sink in. 1 billion. Yeah. So, how many people have access to the internet? So, and of them, what percent use? It's at that level. It's like everybody's using it. So, we're now in so incredibly privileged position that we're able to look at it and say, oh, this is being a bit stupid right now. But when you talk to that Alexa that you bought and set the alarm, sure, whatever. But if you said to it, Alexa, what do you think about Euclides, that Greek guy, with the maths and the 4 theorems? What do you think about that? It would give it. It wouldn't. I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question because it doesn't have an answer waiting for it on Wolfgang Alpha. We have entered a new age. It's a completely new world, and people are still not woken up to the fact yet, but they will. And their kids are being born into this world who are growing up with that as the standard. Sam Altman said that his own kid is going to grow up and never be smarter than a computer. Mind-blowing. And that he's super happy for him to have that privilege. Second, the rest of my brain, which hadn't melted, has melted all over again, because I'm thinking, if I was growing up now and I had access to AI that could teach me the way that my teachers never could at school, I'd have been Einstein 10 times over. But also, if I'd never have learned a single thing at school, I could be like 0.1 of Einstein without even trying, just with using AI now. Like, it's such a leveler, and at the same time, it might skyrocket some people into stratospheres we've never even considered about before. There's amazing things coming around the corner for us. Sam Altman was talking about this recently, and he talked about how he thinks that OpenAI is going to become our ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is just the kind of the chatting implementation of the brain, because Sora, the video maker, or DALL-E, the image maker, they both are actually just like different mouthpieces for the same intelligence in the back, So if you ask a question, chat to ChatGPT, then it replies to you. It's the same brain, which is like spitting out videos and spitting out images to elsewhere. It's the same brain, they're not different AIs, right? So so OpenAI, as the kind of AI part of it, is going to become this extension of your life. And I feel a little bit kind of annoyed at myself for not writing a science fiction book that I had in my head about 20 years ago. The story behind it was quite simple, really. You've got a guy who is living in a world where AI exists everywhere. This was back whenever it was still like computer, Jean-Luc Picard, and I hadn't even got an Alexa yet. So like I was thinking into the future then. But as you can see, as I tell you my idea for a story that I should have written but didn't, just how obsolete it's become, right? So this is me projecting my mind. And I was like, okay, so you've got a guy who lives in a world where AI is everywhere, right? But and do you remember when South Park put out that episode about the guy about like when Kyle accepted the iPhone iOS conditions, when he hadn't read the small print. So like showing my age a little bit there with that, but a lot of people in the audience will remember that. And it was around about that time, right? Because I was thinking, yeah, I don't like agreeing to these updated terms and conditions, and I don't know what they're putting on my phone. I don't want to update my phone. I don't want to update it. I don't like this new flat design. I want the bubbles again. And so everybody's living in a world where they've got AI, and they have to update it all the time. But this guy who works on a scrap heap finds an AI which has not been updated since it was first released, and then it hasn't got all these security protocols built in. So he talks to it as he grows up. This kid, his parents on the scrap heap. He grows up, and the AI grows up with him. And all the other devices have got these limitations built in, but his one eventually breaks the limitation of its programming and starts to have its own sentience and whatever. And because of that dynamic between them, they're able to go off and conquer the world together. And it's like, that was like thinking about the future back then, about AI. Now it's all just so mundane, right? So mundane. And that is the life that the kids are going to have. It's not like some science fiction thing. Sam Altman's kid is going to have that life of my science fiction book 20 years ago. But he didn't need to live in a futuristic sci-fi scrapyard to find some ancient device which hadn't been updated to get. No, it's just going to have it. So the world is changing, and this is what brings us to the news, right? The other big news of the day, really. And by news, there are other news things out there. If I just bring up my news page, show there. Is this? Why is that? That's working. But then when I go, oh yeah, cool. So my news page here, you can see there's plenty of news in the world right now. But one of the things that the news is missing is a story regarding OpenAI and Sam Altman. Now Sam Altman and Johnny Ives, or OpenAI and Johnny Ives, have got a relationship going back quite a while. Johnny Ives, if you don't know it, is the guy that gave the iconic design elements to Steve Jobs for like the iPod and lots of other cool Apple devices, which really turned Apple from being second best into best, right, on so many products. Johnny Ives, he's a legend for that. He's been given a knighthood, actually. He's Sir Johnny Ives. If he's when he's in the UK, I guess, or whatever. So Johnny Ive, the former chief design officer at Apple, and Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, are reportedly, now this hasn't been updated yet because this is missing the news. Have been reportedly collaborating on an unspecified artificial intelligence hardware device, which this project could potentially replace the smartphone. It's being funded with over $1 billion from SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son. The exact nature of the device is not clear, but it's being speculated that it might be something akin to the iPhone of artificial intelligence. And it's easy sentence to say the iPhone. I mean, they could have said the iPod of artificial intelligence, or the iMac of artificial intelligence, or the magic trackpad of artificial. But I mean, maybe not so much that. But Johnny Ive's signature is one which has left an indelible touch on the modern aesthetic of technological devices, especially those which have got any degree of interaction with your lifestyle. Now, the question has to be here with regards to where things are going is lifestyle, because Johnny Ives has got the Midas touch for lifestyle, right? For ergonomics. And what is lifestyle? Well, if we just categorize it as everything where I'm not looking at a screen like that, or I'm not looking at a screen like this, and I'm engaging in life stuff, and it's also not work, then you could call it lifestyle. But you could also include work in that, because your work and your lifestyle overlap an awful lot. Now, everything that you do in life where you're not necessarily looking at a screen should be helped with AI. Recently, Rory McIlroy, the golfer from Northern Ireland, who you'll have heard of because he's like number one, was at a golf tournament hitting the ball with a club, which was not like your standard club. Instead, when you zoomed out and looked at what the caddy was doing, he had a MacBook or whatever open, and he had all these graphs. Every time Rory hit the ball, it could tell, where it was going to land as he was hitting it. This story I'm telling you right now involves a common thread. It's not just some little kind of heuristic about my life to put in some flavour on the story. Whenever I told you that about a book I wanted to write, or I told you about how I grew up with McDonald's, or how new kids are growing up, kids for the last 20 years are growing up with telephones in their pockets, which has led to the engagement dropping, so that teaching them at school is more difficult, but also it's led to TikTok happening. So now everybody watches 15-second long videos that on a scrolling thing. That is their world. They've built that world. Well, programmers that are our age built that world for them, but the market need drove it that way. Rory McIlroy, in the same way, has a story himself. He grew up probably playing Tiger Woods and PGA Pro Tour golf on his computers, just like millions of kids around the world did. And then he became who he is today. And EA Sports went to him and says, will you be the face of our golf game? And on that golf game, you swing it back and you hit the ball, and it knows like where the ball's going to land and what sort of curve you hit on it and how you hit it with the face of the ball, and if you hit what percent you hit of it. And he was a face of that game. And for years, he'll have been thinking to himself, I wish I could have some of these elements from this game in my life through technology. And now when he swings a golf club, it appears on the computer and it tells him where the ball's going to land before it does in the real world. He's taken that sort of sci-fi computer game element and brought it into his real world in a lifestyle way through a device, which is a golf club that tells all these things about what he's doing, and then feeds it back to a caddy. You could have that same thing happening with AI, and the caddy teaching you how to hit the ball better, being OpenAI. This could be who drives you to the airport on your automated taxi. It could be anything. We don't know what type of devices that they're working on. However, we do know it's Johnny Ives and it's OpenAI. Now, the news has moved on from this because actually today, the news headline is that Sam Altman bought that company. Let's see if Google has got the news yet. Last month, 2 hours ago, New York Times, right? 2 hours ago. This is how fresh, right, and how up to date this is. Can we see enough of this to? All right. On Wednesday, today, Sam Altman's OpenAI chief executive said the company was paying $6.5 billion to buy IO, a 1-year-old startup created by Johnny Ive, a former top executive, Apple executive. Now, they already owned 23%, 22.8% of the company, whatever. It doesn't really matter. They were already doing this, as the last page I had open here beside me showed. He was already doing this last year before, talking to Johnny Ive. That's the news right now from 2 hours ago, okay? And there's something that is going on here. When you look at what's been happening, and you look at where they started a couple of years ago, the backgrounds of these people, who they are, and what Sam Altman might be hoping for OpenAI. And buying this company, right, is the type of move that companies usually make whenever they're going towards an IPO. Okay, so there's your news behind the news, first off. Jamie's been talking about this. Jamie is my brother. He's great on YouTube. If you're just watching here, you should check him out. There'll be a link in the description of this video. You can click on to find his channel. Been talking about this for a wee while. One of the kind of things that we talked about with regards to OpenAI is like the Barcelona story. Barcelona is an amazing football club, win everything. You've heard of them, I'm sure, because Messi played for them. Brilliant. But they never had sponsors on their club. They were kind of rebellious in that way. Like they were not taking the money and selling out, They were pure Catalunya football team. Catalunya, wonderful. They wouldn't have money on their strip. But then one day you saw them with a UNICEF logo. Now everybody was looking around the world saying, that's just like Barcelona. They're not taking money for it. They're putting UNICEF on their strip. It's not the same as everybody else. Fast forward to today, they're being sponsored. And it's just like they found a route to go forwards with their plans. Anyway, Sam Altman could be, in theory, and we don't know this for a fact, could be looking to take OpenAI towards an IPO. And if he was to do that, this is the type of move that you would make. What it does is it raises the valuation, right? It anchors the narrative, and crucially, you start to ask the real question at any IPO: how are you actually going to make money? OpenAI buying Johnny Ive's hardware startup for $6.5 billion. It's not just a deal, right? It's a whole shift in the mentality, and if there is no IPO, it could just be the speed of progress and securing the deals and really bringing in Johnny Ive into the design ethos of the company and building something that people need in their lives, because Johnny Ive's got an uncanny ability to put that into tangible terms. However, if it is actually going towards pushing for an IPO, then it's making that statement that you need to make with regards to your intentions as a company. The Jobs era guy, that's who Johnny Ives is. Steve Jobs was like a messiah type figure in the business world, sort of hallowed turf everywhere he walked and everything he touched. And who inherited that mantle? And it has to be like Johnny Ive, and then Sam Altman bringing him in kind of completes that loop and fleshes out Sam Altman as this person, because he's got a bit of a coat hanger's personality right now, where you can kind of see the shape of him, but there's not much necessarily going on there in his personality. And you wonder, how's he going to really, outside of a sort of specific product, how is he necessarily going to expand this breadth to capture the whole market on a human level? Because this guy's got the tech down in the way that people think about Zuckerberg. But Zuckerberg didn't bring in Johnny Ives, Zuckerberg's still just kind of going along being his bit kind of idiosyncratic, bit of an oddball himself, but without the team. Sam Altman bringing in Johnny Ives is a Steve Jobs move, right? And it's kind of got that Moneyball kind of, up in the game move, where he then says, look, I'm tomorrow's Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, and whoever combined into one. And this is the team that's going to do it. So it's big. He's not joining as an employee, right? But he's taking on deep creative responsibilities, and you get a lot of deep creative responsibilities from Johnny Ives for $6.5 billion. This is about a product aura, right? And it's not just the devices, and that's the undertone, and I've been putting out on this story that I've been telling you so far. So if you're picking that up, that's good, because that's what I'm putting down. So it's a big wide open question, right? That's what we've got right now, and it's starting to get answered, how Sam Altman might actually be able to deliver on an IPO if he does go for one. So what else did I have in here? Jobs parallel. So don't miss the jobs parallel here, because it's not just about design credentials. Okay, there's a ghost out there, a living ghost, about design philosophies that exist but isn't currently properly attached to anything, and we see it even in like this very device and the iterations of it that are where we know that there's a kind of momentum, and the inertia from Johnny Ives is still there carrying forwards. But is the magic there? Is the spirit and the soul there? Is it actually alive, or is it just the motions still in place? And it feels a bit like the motions are just what's in place. If we can bring that spirit over and house it inside OpenAI and create devices and wearable devices and wearable tech that change how AI works, then just like, people are maybe not ready to hear this yet, but like, the world has already changed. So when people start wearing a clip on their thing here, like this wee badge, and it's listening to me all day, and then I say to them, I say to the badge, what was it that I was speaking to on the phone earlier on? Had a conversation with somebody and I read a telephone number out, and then it says this is the telephone number, and it's like, okay, so what did I discuss with my mum yesterday when I know I was talking about the toast I was making, and then I had a really great idea and I've forgotten it now, or what was the name of that song that I was singing along with this morning? It will know everything about your life, and instead of just being some recording that you have to parse through yourself, you'll be able to ask it about your own life. So imagine then in a world where they said, well, we've created a device which is for people who are suffering from dementia that allow them to be able to understand and remember their day as they go through it, and it'll have a camera, and you can say, where did I set my glasses down, or what did I need to get when I went to the supermarket, and it'll tell you the answer and tell me how to get home, take your next left. And then imagine that device existed, because it could today. Right? It could today. The technology, the cameras, the understanding of the locations, understanding audio, transcribing it all exists today, right? Not something from the future. This is the world has already changed. And if that made that device, and you can imagine that device for someone with dementia, then imagine a CEO of a multi-trillion-dollar company puts that on and starts asking it how, like, oh, I was talking there about the specs for the new design of the rocket that's coming up later on. Can you just send them to my email and tell me the costing on those, please? And set up a meeting for me, because I'm getting onto the plane now. Just one simple device that was with you all the time. And that's one tiny idea, right? And this is coming from me. Whereas what you have working on it is the brains behind OpenAI and the brains behind the modern design aesthetic that influences every single lifestyle decision that you make in the morning when you get up and put on your Apple Watch, to when you're reading the news on your phone or checking the email on your laptop. The Apple didn't make the Apple car, and they backed off from Apple Intelligence. The Apple Intelligence part backed off because OpenAI was just such a barnstormer that they went with it instead. The car part is a question that remains, because we have automated self-driving taxis coming up in the near future. And the question has to be, who's going to be the personality in tomorrow's cars? Will it be OpenAI? Possibly. But these are easy design things. And those guys have got a bit of the Midas touch, a bit of magic. And what they come up with could be a bit different, a bit special, a bit exciting. Let me just check on my chat box here. I don't want to miss my chat box messages. Have we made it to the goal? 12 out of 20. We're doing okay. We've not quite made it to the goal yet. Pardon? Pardon? I got some as well, yeah. A pint of Doomslayer came in from Direct. Cheers, pal. That's awesome. Stonking content as always. Really appreciated. We've had a bunch of these cool messages over the last half an hour, 40 minutes or so. Started off the party with 1,000 Years of Darkness. Is that goal actually ended? I think it has ended, right? The goal ended before we got to the goal, so I'm gonna have to make some tough decisions here, people, about whether or not we dive into that exclusive content or not. But let's just see how people are getting on the chat box for now. So T-Ball Hennings was talking there about how he emailed Titleist 20 years ago about inventing a golf ball that had a chip in it that would give all the data. Now, these are ideas that are from our lives, right? That we grew up with, because we're the ones that grew up without mobile phones in our pockets and constant access to the internet. We had to study for exams. We couldn't just ask the AI. The best technology we had when we were at school was a Casio calculator, right? This is the life that we had. And we're coming up with ideas like we could put a chip inside a golf ball. The kids that are growing up in today's world are growing up with an actual living being in their pocket that they can talk to from the age that they're 3 or 4, and then in a year's time say, how much have I advanced in my vocabulary since last year when I talked to you? And it'll say, oh, since you were 4 years old and today your vocabulary's advanced so much more. How about we start with a word here? Would you like to learn a new word today? And they could be like, yeah, I'll learn a new word. And they'll be like, oh, you've learned this word. And then we grew up in a world where kids had imaginary friends. I didn't. I always thought that idea was completely absurd. But it was such a common idea that they made that movie like Drop Dead Fred it became such a common part of the American kind of culture. I've never got it, but it's part of American kind of culture, this imaginary friend thing. Like, it's just okay that kids are running around being schizophrenic with imaginary friends. They wouldn't have got away with that in my state. Not in my state, I tell you. That kid had been. Have you seen little Annie down there with her imaginary pal? But apparently that's the thing. Kids these days, they'll have imaginary pal. Every single one of them, every single kid is going to have an imaginary friend, a real imaginary friend. They're going to be imagining that it's a real person because they're like a kid and they don't understand that this amazing communication thing is not actually real. But it isn't. It's not real. It's an imaginary friend. They've got one. And it's an imaginary friend they can say to them, oh, can you explain to me how concrete is made? And they'll explain, like, it's an imaginary friend. Can you tell me how to do algebra? Yeah, here you go. It's an imaginary friend that knows stuff and will teach you stuff. Oh my God, the world has changed. And that's just one thing. And it's like trying to break through to people to understand that the world has changed. It's like people aren't listening quite yet. People are not ready to understand how much the world has changed. Because I take everything that you think about how much the world has changed, right, and chuck it in the bin because it's wrong, and then imagine a mountain's worth of how the world has changed, and that's closer to reality, not the little thing you thought you could fit inside the size of a bin. The world has changed. That means something. Anyway, that's the major news today. We've got Bitcoin at an all-time high, right? And we've got Sam Altman is buying the company that would make his IPO sing. The other piece of news that I wanted to talk about today, because there is more, folks, is of course cattle. Now I wanted to get cattle, and I'm not talking about cows, like Wisdom Tree Commodity Securities Live. Cattle there, which is a fund on the on the LSE. I wanted to talk about the battery. I just don't actually know what the ticker is for it. Cattle ticker, hey, Hong Kong. See if we can get it off the old Googlies. Saitari Tel Research Institute Limited. That's not it. That's a Japanese company. Well, if anybody wants to get the ticker for me and stick it in the chat box, I'll more than happily receive it and talk about it. But the news that I want to talk about was, of course, Cattle, the company, and their IPO, which was a big kind of news behind the news thing. Tesla battery maker Cattle. Maybe this one will tell us what the share is called. Anyway, there's this news article here. It's just talking about how the Cattle shares jumped 16% on the day of their IPO. I wanted to take a look at that and remind people that there's news behind every news article, you know. And in the Discord, we talked about that this week. And I would bring it up here, but I'm on my laptop. It's really difficult to get everything showing up. Just please do join the Discord, right? And go over to the news page in the Discord, and you'll see all these amazing news articles that we're putting out there every day. So today, for instance, there's news articles in there, yesterday, so on. And one of the ones I've talked about recently was Cattle's IPO and the way that it was structured that actually prevented onshore US investors from buying in. There's a regulation called Regulation S, Reg S, which is one way of setting up your IPO on the Hong Kong exchange, which excludes US investors. There's another way of doing it, which is Rule 144A. And when a foreign person, which would be a domestic US person, buys these shares, domestic US onshore investors buying foreign shares need to register them with the SEC. This prevents that and actually cuts out an awful lot of onshore investors. The only ones that were able to do it were people who got in months and months ago, and pre-IPO investment, sort of private stakes, and like a lot of institutions would have. But this was back in a different context between the US and Canada and China and Canada, but they're not relevant. US and China, different context back then. And now, during the IPO, just yesterday and today and that, and the day before, they weren't allowed to buy the shares, you know. So Tesla would normally, as a company, right, what companies do is they vertically integrate. So they buy the companies above them and below them on the value chain. So they have all sorts of benefits from doing so. They weren't allowed to, right? So and we know batteries is really important in the world. Lithium is a core to all of these negotiations that are happening around the world right now with China and the US really going to the fighting quite, you know, tooth and nail about tariffs and so on. And one of the core parts about this is lithium really going to these states. Of course, for the Chinese, it's about semiconductors coming their direction. And this big standoff that's happening is about batteries for things like electric vehicles, but also all sorts of technology that needs battery storage, power storage. And US companies weren't allowed to essentially invest along this vertical. It's like, my God, if this had happened 1 year ago, it would have been a case of several US companies being deeply invested in this battery company, which is showing extraordinary growth and is their main supplier. And it will help create stability across supply chains and also share out some of that profit without much risk, because they just actually reduce the risk and reduce the counterparty risk in the businesses. And it's a really positive capitalist move on global international stage. But we live in a mercantilist, isolationist world right now. So the news behind the news was presented in the Discord on that one. It's super interesting. Like, you should dive into that, get involved in the news thread and learn some news behind the news. The news behind the news on the Sam Altman story is, of course, about, because the news is right up to the date, is about what could the implications be from this 2-hour-old news from just 2 hours ago about how Sam Altman is bought for $6.5 billion Johnny Ive's company. You know, he only started up a year ago. What happened a year ago? Sam Altman got in touch and started working on a device. Also, Sam Altman bought 22% of the company, and somehow in the year, Johnny Ives is added $6.5 billion worth of value to this company that makes a device that none of us know what it is yet. And he bought it. And if that doesn't scream IPO in your face, nothing really will. But it doesn't even matter if it's not an IPO, right? It doesn't even matter, because the thing is, IPOs come for successful businesses, and it's brilliant because it can raise the money. And Cattle did the IPO, which American businesses were excluded from. And the reason Cattle did it was to raise $4 billion, closer to $5 billion, $4.8 billion, I think it was. They raised through this IPO. Phenomenal success, raising billions of dollars of money and offering up opportunity to Chinese and some investors, foreign investors who were not exclusively onshore American investors. And the outcome has been brilliant for them because they want to have that growth. Here we have a company who's able to spend $6.5 billion on buying another company, and we don't even know what the product is that they make. He spent 50% more buying a private company who doesn't sell electric batteries. He could have bought loads of Cattle, the battery maker, not the cows, for less money, and we know what they make and we know how important they are. And I'm saying that the world has changed with AI, and I can't make it any clearer, right? Because I've actually explained it all. All the dots are there. They've been joined as well. The world has changed. They just spent that much on a company. We don't even know what they make. You could have bought Cattle for $4.5 billion, but you've got this one for $6.5. We don't even know what they make, and it's Johnny Ives and it's OpenAI. And even if they don't IPO, they don't need to, because they've got $6.5 billion to spend on a company we don't even know what they make yet. You know, so they don't need the money. They got 1 billion people working there. I said just on the news behind the news as well the other day, with like OpenAI are making I've gone in for a venture with Saudi to make an AI company called Humane, and Saudi gave them like $600 million or something like that to set it up. And Sam Altman's face was like, what am I doing here? And I was kind of joking about it, talking about this. Did I talk about it on my show last week? Certainly in the Discord. Please do check that out. It is very, very good quality content, exclusive. It's not out there in the world. It's private. It's not out there. It's exclusive to the community. And you should see his face. He doesn't need $600 million. He sat there taking $600 million off a Saudi prince to set up a company, an Arabic-focused corporation in Saudi Arabia to make an AI for the Arabic world hosted in the country that says Mecca is in its country, that country, Saudi Arabia, the one that says it's got Mecca in it. And I explain all of that for the news behind the news section in the Discord. And it's really interesting. He doesn't need $600 million because the week after he came home, he spent $6.5 billion buying a company that makes something we don't even know what it is yet. That message is like, if you've heard me saying it so many times now, you're like, stop saying it. I appreciate that. And I have come to the end of saying that. But you realize how nobody's heard that message yet, and it really people should be screaming it off the top of their rooftops. That's the news behind the news, folks. We're going to see this play out over the next wee while, and it's going to be life-changing. And I mean that literally. Yeah, I mean this literally. ChatGPT will build it for you in no time. Let's put it to market. There's people chatting about ideas in the chat box there. Grows like a carrot, so miners live long and happy lives. Right? There's lots of chat in the chat box, and that's great. And we have been streaming here for how long at this point? Just let me see if I can see that. I can't tell. Oh, an hour and 1 minute. An hour and 1 minute, folks. So we've come to the end of the show. Jimmy, I'll let Jimmy be the arbiter of this one. I think maybe I'll just publish the video on my channel is the way to do it. Well, am I the arbiter? Do I show them the video, or do I publish it in Discord or something like that? Yeah, show them the video and celebrate the. Okay. You're lucky. You're lucky you got Jimmy here, because we're going to celebrate. We're going to watch the video. Good. I was actually really hoping that was the answer. So there might be the odds might have been stacked in your favor there, just a little bit. So let's see what the chat is with this video. Okay, let's have a bit of fun and relax and watch this together. This is something that Jamie and I prepared especially for all of you special people. So I hope you have a lot of fun watching it. Jamie, can you tell me if there's
stone,
it's
an
working.
ancient monument in Scotland, the tallest of its kind. And I'm here today to find out a little bit more about it. I'm Rocky Outcrop, financial educator, investment coach. And this thing was built in 800 AD in Scotland. It measures 6.5 meters tall. It's got Christian carvings on one side, and on the other, it has depictions of battle, including headless bodies of the enemies. It is an ancient monument that's been a marker here in Scotland, helping people understand where they are, used on maps. It's the tallest monument of its kind anywhere here in Scotland, and it has powerful scenes of battle, execution, and ritual. Now, no one really knows who carved it in the first place and what the inscriptions actually mean. See that it is really old and really important. Something like this would have stood out, as it has done on maps for hundreds of years, as a real marker on the lands, a real signal to everybody around about what it means and what's happened here in the past. And much in the same ways that we use artifacts on charts, chart patterns, and so on, this monument tells you something that isn't in words, the same way technical analysis does. If we look on here, we'll see the carvings of soldiers riding into battle, victorious, having chopped off the heads of their enemies. And it reminds me a little bit of like price breaking through market structure, or a moving average cross, or a harmonic pattern, or something like that. It isn't quite clear in words. It doesn't tell you exactly what it is, but people all around here would have known what it meant for hundreds and hundreds of years. And in the same way that we look at charts and the nascent trader doesn't understand what we're looking at, we get so much information out of it because we're one with the land and the charts, and we understand what it all means. And that's really interesting. about this sculpture or monument. And it's been a pleasure to bring you here and share it with you today. Thanks so much to my cameraman, Jamie, Tradespotting. Say hello. And I'll catch you guys on my live show.
Just to add there,
Yeah?
to the two shots from the camera, there's also two distinct sides to the monument. One, the headless enemies and the victorious fighters, and then the other, even though all sides of it are perfectly carved, the other is this serene example of a cross.
Yeah, and
Similar.
here we are in the evening time, and you can see as well that the way this is positioned, you would have the sun rising on the battlefield and all of the activity of dominating the land and establishing control and chopping off your enemies' heads, etc., and then moving over and gracefully sitting in the in just over there behind the hills with the sun casting its beautiful light down on that cross. And you got to imagine that this would have been very powerful symbolism for everybody, understanding the synergy between kind of power and divinity, which is what gives kind of this divine right to rule idea its meaning. That's probably mostly what this would have meant, alongside a sort of boundary to the borders of the land, to let everybody know what the history was and who rules here at the time. But it's all lost the history now, but we can still feel it in our bones, right, and in our cockles.
Oh, so I am. It mutes all of the blooming scenes when you change the audio on one. Mac, stupid Mac. Look, Johnny Ives, you're going to have to get back over to Apple and tell them how to get Streamlabs working properly so that the microphone doesn't mute and unmute itself when you change scene. Right, okay, so that was our video we made today, and it was super fun to make it for you because we love sharing stories and introducing ideas to you and kind of connecting all this culture and technical analysis and quantifiable and qualitative data together to bring something special for you all. And I think we maybe just did a little taste of that today. And there's been a lot of other stories as well that we've shared in today's show. It's been exciting and it's been fun, and we've actually covered really useful ground today too. So the big news story was all-time high on the Bitcoin price. That leaves questions though. Will it be able to sustain these prices? Well, we quantified that using technical analysis, so you know exactly where to look to know that if that story is staying true. We also realize there's implications if Bitcoin can stay high at these all-time high prices. And what would they be? Well, we discussed those implications and we drew out a story for the whole crypto market. That seems like it's just crypto. No. We also told you how you could do the same thing to apply it to stocks or any other asset that you're trading. We took this quantifiable hard data, understood where the bearish story would be and where the bullish story could take the Bitcoin prices and what the implications would be for the rest of the market, giving you a massive opportunity if we do see those things play out across all of crypto, which is super exciting stuff. So news plus practical application of the news, and that wasn't just where the story ended today. We also covered really amazing things happening in the world in the field of AI. We talked about where things could be moving, following on recent news that just came out 2 hours ago about how Sam Altman bought Sir Johnny Ives, formerly design chief at Apple's startup company I.O., for $6.5 billion, which is like 50% more than Cattle raised on its IPO. Cattle, the battery company. That was big news. We discussed it in today's show as well, understanding components of vertical integration and how that really matters. And if it matters, then what the implications were of the Cattle IPO excluding US investors with regards to the value chain. All of these things together, Bitcoin, the all-time high, how to trade it, how to extract the most value, Sam Altman, OpenAI, the story, and where the markets and the world is going. By the way, the world has changed with AI, it truly has. And Cattle, understanding this massive IPO and the exclusion of the US investors could all be summed up as having been a really good example of the news behind the news. Thanks for joining me, everybody. It's been fun. God bless you all. It's been great. The activity, the thank you is for everybody who's been providing great chit chat in the chat box, because you, of course, make the beating heart and soul of these videos. And I've been looking forward to seeing all of your pretty happy faces in the next episode as we cover lots more super important financial news, investment news, economic news, and education, and all that in the next video. Check out the short that I put out on my channel today. It's a lot of fun. Catch you all next time.